Hello, and welcome to the Muses Lab, your destination for all things spiritual, sensual, and pleasurable. Here I explore the nuances of our human experience, connect with practitioners to support your glow up, and share my lessons and blessings as perspective to move you closer to alignment and self-empowerment. I invite you to join me on this adventure of discovery and hope what you receive inspires you to become the muse of your life's journey. So without further ado, let's explore. Hello, and welcome to the Muses Lab podcast. It's your girl, Siobhan L., and it has been a minute since I've recorded anything, and I find it ironic that I decide to do it during election time. We're only a few days away from Election Day, and by the time this podcast publishes, I will have done my early voting. And what's interesting is that I don't talk about politics often. I talk about the craziness that goes on Earth. I talk about the craziness that takes place in North America, which is the continent where I reside, in the country of the United States of America. I talk about those things that goes on. I talk about capitalism, but a lot of capitalistic ways are not just specific to the United States. They are affecting us all across the world. So I talk about those things: human interactions, relationships, spirituality, of course, sex, of course, our mental health. I talk about the things that go on in the world, in the Muses Lab, all of the things that are happening to us and humanity, that affect our humanity, that affect our ability to self-actualize, that affect our ability to have strong relationships with other people, that affect our ability to love and to experience pleasure, all the outside external things that go on in the world. I try to touch on as many things as possible to give context and to give a space of a spectrum, so at least one person can see themselves somewhere within the content that I create. But I don't talk about my politics. And there's reasons why I don't talk about my politics. And maybe someone may call this a little PTSD. Someone may say that. But the last time I had a conversation about politics, I was in high school. And it was with someone who I liked, a friend of mine, male friend of mine, who I genuinely liked. And it ended our friendship. And from that point forward, I just stopped talking about politics. I kept my opinions to myself. So religion and politics are two things that I've always avoided in conversations with other human beings. But being a practicing spiritualist, a professional spiritualist, I particularly talk about religion too much unless I'm providing historical context. But I do talk about spirituality in detail and in depth. So not necessarily religion, but I do talk about spirituality. Politics is the conversation that I typically avoid unless it's in a contained space, in a contained, safe and brave space around people who can have intellectual conversation where it's not trolling, people aren't being condescending, folks aren't trying to attack me verbally, in places where I can really have genuine conversations where I can learn from others and people can possibly learn from me. But this was prompted by a post by Demetria Lucas, who I admire a lot as a cultural icon, as a cultural commentating icon within our generation. She posted a picture of VP Harris at the Capitol, and essentially her last stitch effort for campaign, on the campaign trail, I should say. And the picture of VP Harris looked very presidential. Doesn't necessarily mean she's going to win, but it does offer a symbol of hope for some. Right? It's early morning in Jersey. And as I sat in the bathroom, as I was awakening from high slumber and allowing my body to connect with earth and be here fully in mind, body, and spirit, I thought about going in stories after I finished my early voting to talk about what I'm feeling, what I'm gathering at this time. And as the thoughts started flooding in, the words started downloading to me, I was like, nah, this not Instagram story. This is definitely a podcast episode, because there's so many things in depth that I want to explore in this moment, and I don't want to get cut off by a 60-minute timer. So I have my own platform, this allows me to speak in depth, and I can share and people can listen without interruption and engage the way that they would like to engage. Funny thing, right? As someone who identifies as a psychic medium, when I first came across my gifts, you might hear me tapping keys. This was March of 2020. Started recording downloads. Well, I started recording downloads that I would receive during meditation when I touched and agreed with my gifts and touched and agreed with being a psychic medium. I started recording my downloads in journals, so I have several journals. That was like 8 years ago. So I have several journals within the last 8 years where I have recorded meditative downloads that I've received in meditation, sitting at my altar, allowing myself to receive information and process information, and whether I would share it publicly or it was something for me to keep so that I can document growth and process and evolution as the timeline continues. I had these downloads documented, but this one I had in the Notes app on my phone. It's not completely accurate, but there are some things that work, right? Biden will win the election and have Warren as his VP. Wasn't Elizabeth Warren, but it was VP Harris. This is the last opportunity to ensure Democrats have control. I wrote down that Warren would win the presidency in 2024. This will begin 8 years of feminine rule with a mostly women presidential cabinet. 45 days are numbered and he will be removed. It was March 4th, 2020 at 12:42 p.m. Well, it wasn't Elizabeth Warren who became President Biden's VP. It was Kamala Harris, right? So here's what I thought was going to happen once President Biden announced that he was running again for president. What I thought was him and VP Harris would run on the ticket again. He would get into office. And however the story was conjured and created, he would step down from presidency due to health reasons. Not necessarily because he's old, but because the presidency takes a toll on you. We can look at our beloved President Barack Obama. That man was black hair when he took presidency in 2008, and by 2012, by 2020 really, or with 2012, I can't remember. I know it was 8 years. He did 2 terms. So by the end of his second term, the man was fully gray. Okay. So the presidency does indeed age you. I mean, Bill Clinton was at that time the youngest president we had in the country, and he was old and wrinkly by the time, even baby Bush was old and wrinkly by the time he finished. Okay. So the presidency ages you, right? And when you are already in your seasoned space, because remember, President Biden has had a lucrative and fruitful political career spanning decades since the civil rights movement. This man has been in politics. He was part of the civil rights movement, right? He was an active participant in the civil rights movement. So now we're talking, 60 something years, so 50 years, 50 plus years of a political career. Man is seasoned, right? And presidency again takes a toll on your body. So I thought that he would step down, and then of course that would put VP Harris in place as acting president. Maybe they would do a special election. She would probably win anyway. And that's how we would move forward the next 4 years. What I did not anticipate was for President Biden to step down and move VP Harris into the lead for the ticket. And when that happened, I got a chill. And I was like, oh shit, this might happen. And I went back to my notes. And at the time, I couldn't conceptualize a Black woman being close to the highest seat, because when she did run for president before, I was like, nah, it wouldn't be her. I mean, it could be her because, based on what we thought was her track record as a prosecutor, I believed at that time that she would uphold the interests of white men, right? White men like to do that. They like to put Black women in positions of power who they feel that they can pull the strings, maybe like a Manchurian candidate. They like to do that. They like to use us as a tool for their self-interest. And unfortunately, there are a lot of Black women who are in positions of authority who lean into that archetype and call it achievement and call it making it and call it progression, right? It's very regressive, right? But over centuries, over time, back to when we were enslaved Africans on this country, white men have used Black women for their own tools of self-gain and their agendas, right? It's unfortunate, but that's part of the history that we can't ignore, right? So before I move on, I'm also being told to say, my spirits are speaking to me. I'm being told to say, but also because Black women have their own agendas and allow themselves to play the game, I have to say that part and can't leave it open-ended as if we were just puppets, because we were not. Black women who were in those positions learned how to play the game and became strategists. And while white men believed that they were using Black women for their own personal gain and their own self-interest, Black women always had their own agenda that was relative to the upliftment and the betterment and the progression of their people. Now I can continue. So with that, I considered that she might be able to get in, but when she dropped out of the race or dropped out as a presidential candidate and hopped on President Biden's ticket, I thought, okay, cool. This is getting somewhere. I see where this is going. Because again, at the time when I received that download, I just couldn't conceptualize, because I believed that Elizabeth Warren was the ideal candidate to lead this country. And fast forward, it was not. It was VP Harris. So I'm saying that to say that we often receive information from the divine, and because it does not manifest exactly as we receive it, we doubt our intuition and go, oh, see, I was wrong. I wasn't wrong. Circumstances changed that made what this landscape could be different. So President Biden won, and there was a woman who was his running mate, but it wasn't Elizabeth Warren. It was VP Harris. So here we are, 2024. With the possibility of our first woman president, who happens to be a Black woman, despite what the interwebs say and the trolls say and all those things. She's Black. She's mixed race, but she's still Black, right? Jamaicans are Black. Not Black American, but they still Black, right? We are at the precipice of the possibility of women running the government. And I know that scares people, and not just white people. That scares a lot of Black men. I'm not going to go too far into that, but that scares a lot of people, because any of us who are history buffs or even conspiracy theorists, we're aware that there are parts of the earth that have been under matriarchal rule for centuries before the patriarchy took over. And the patriarchy, unfortunately, is also a symbol of white supremacy. So when you have the matriarch ruled by the Black woman, or a Black woman who has been a mother to this country for centuries, that sparks something in people, right? It is the breast of the Black woman. By the way, this is not what I came here to talk about, but this is where I'm at. So this is where I'm going. It was the breast of the Black woman that fed the descendants of white people who exist today. If you are a white American born and bred, and your family has traced back lineages to the 1700s, to the 1500s, to the 1400s, a Black woman fed your great grandpappies and grandmommies, and a Black woman nestled the stomach of your descendants, right? Because we were the enslaved. White women may have birthed their babies, but they didn't breastfeed their own children. Black women breastfed children here. So Black women are the mothers of this country. So when you think about that, when you think about Black women being the mother of this country, the matriarch of this country, and a Black woman now running the country, holding the highest office in this country, in this country's government, it makes people fearful for various reasons, right? The reason why I did not talk about the importance of voting and all those things is because I recognize within my community, within the Muses Lab community, there are various different people who exist. They're either not going to vote, which for me, that will never be the solution. Not voting is not a solution. Not taking action is not a solution, because you can't not vote and then complain about the state of the world where you didn't exercise your right to vote. Even if you feel like you don't have a voice, because I used to feel like that. Why do I vote? This is happening. This is happening. This is happening. People are, rigging elections and all those things. And the powers that be are still in play and they still pull the strings. But I can complain because I exercise my right to vote, and I have the right to gripe about why my vote is not moving the needle in the direction that it needs to be for the preservation of the humans that live on Earth, that live in this country, that live in my state, that live in my county, right? I'm going to always exercise my right to vote regardless. That's a personal choice, right? But I know that there are a lot of people who just choose not to vote and think that their lack of participation is not going to change things. That's the lie that you've been sold. That's the lie that you tell yourself, right? Then there's people who will vote, but will vote off the beaten path, right? They'll vote green, they'll vote independent, someone that's not part of the two-party system. And while I feel like that might be helpful, they do that in times like now where our lives are on the line. And that's not helping. That's almost as worse as not voting, because now you split the vote. And the more people, and it's typically people who would normally vote Democratic, who will vote independent, green, or off the blue path. They'll vote blue, but not blue. I'm going to vote green. And that's making it worse, because all it does is just give more of the red votes the opportunity to prevail, right? And what I wish is that those who are not part of the two-party system, who are independent, who are grassroots, who are trying to make their way up the political chain, the political matter, have seats in the House, so on and so forth. I wish they did not wait until 2 months before an election to talk about what they're doing. We should never hear about your platform, your points, and your vision 2 months before the election and then try to coax us to vote green. We should hear so much more about your platform and what you do now. Like, now is the time to tell us, yeah, you're voting part of this two-party system because we have to make a choice, because our lives are literally on the line. While you make that vote, I want you for the next election to consider me. Like, I need to hear about you now. I need you to be in my face for the next 4 years so that I feel confident enough to go against the two-party system and vote for someone who can hopefully make change. I need that now. I don't need that in August, because I'm not voting for you. I don't know you. I haven't seen you. You haven't been on these interwebs. Like, if you are not going to adhere to the two-party system and you want to disrupt the two-party system, you need to be in my face like Black men with a podcast. I need that type of energy, but like now. I need you to do it like now. I don't need you to do it August, 2 months before the next presidential election or the next state election or gubernatorial election. I don't need you to do it then. I need you to do it now. I need you to be in my face now so that I know you, so that I see you. And then I can make a educated decision. I can make an informed decision on whether I'm going to shift my vote in a different direction. So I know that I have people in the community that regardless of what it is, they're just going to purposefully not vote within the two-party system, which again is just as bad as not voting. And then it's the rest of us who will vote. Which way they're going to vote is their personal decision. But because I know I have those three different archetypes in our community, I just steer clear of making a stake in the ground specifically because I don't feel like arguing. Not because I'm scared or I'm afraid. I don't feel like going back and forth about my personal interests. But what I will do is encourage you to vote. I'll encourage you to do that because we just have to. That's just the way the system is set up. And if we try to go against the system while it's actively dismantling, we're going to fuck it up. You can't go against the system while it is actively dismantling. You have to ride the wave. And as it dismantles, then you take up your cross, you gather what's left, and then you start to rebuild. As things are crumbling, you never walk into the crumble because you're going to get hit. It's an active volcano. You don't run into the lava when the volcano is active. You run away from the lava and you wait until it cools and then you see what's left and then you rebuild from there. Like we're in a tower moment right now with the country in particularly, but definitely with Earth. We're in this tower moment. There's so many shifts and changes and things that are falling apart at this time. It does not make sense to try to be outliers in a time where we need community, right? Unless we're going to be outliers in community. But to be like, no, I'm going left when we need to go straight or, northwest, it's going to throw us off, right? So I say all that to say that I am actually slightly afraid to see if my download from March 4th, 2020 comes to pass. I haven't allowed myself to feel any hope for VP Harris running for president. I haven't allowed myself to get excited about it and feel fired up and ready to go. I haven't because I let myself get excited about Hillary Clinton and white women failed us. They failed us in ways that I can't even describe. They failed us. So I don't want to get excited about it, but as that picture that Demetria Lucas shared on her platform on Instagram sits in my frontal lobe, right in the middle of my mind's eye, it's hard for me to ignore what that symbolizes. It's hard for me to ignore the crucialness, it's not a word, but I'm creating it, the crucialness of what my vote means and the possibility of having a mostly women or female identified cabinet. It gives me chills, but like oh my gosh, could this be? But I temper myself down in that space of hope because I don't want to be utterly disappointed. Because when 45 got in office, I went dark for like a couple weeks because I knew what it meant for us. I knew what that meant. And if this person is allowed to be back in office, I know what this means. There's a reason why Handmaid's Tale and Black Mirror had to take a break. Because when reality starts to mimic people's vision, you got to take a step back. When it's starting to be parallel to what we are experiencing in real time, you got to take a step back. I haven't yet revisited Parable of the Sower, but I already know the first 10 pages is exactly what we're experiencing. It literally takes place in 2024. And Octavia E. Butler wrote that in like the 90s. So here we are, 30 plus years ahead. And what she wrote then is exact down to the virus that's ripping through Earth. It was COVID. was the coronavirus. I mean, you have writers who have an intuitive eye, and how that manifests is interesting. I mean, Handmaid's Tale is based off a novel that was written in like the 1960s, right? And here we are 40, 50 years later. And it's a possibility that North America can turn into Gilead. Like, the thought of that, how close we are to that. Even thinking about motherland, right? We don't have witches per se who've become the protectors of the United States, but there are people in the government on the opposite side of the aisle that wear red hats who want us to go back to the United States being territories, that want to succeed from the United States. I don't know how lucrative that would be for us, but that's a scary thing for people to want to create their own government, which means if you were to go into that territory, you wouldn't be bound by the laws and the policies and the guidelines and the rules of everyone else. That means that territory has its own rules. And if you don't know what those rules are, you're up shit's creek. So you have people wanting to create their own laws and rules that are separate from the general body. And it'll fuck us, particularly if you don't look like the people who run those towns, the states, and those cities. It's very uncertain times that we live in. And this isn't the type of uncertainty that allows us to explore and be inquisitive. This is the type of uncertainty that forces you to make moves to protect yourself. We have an influx of expatriates who have left this country because they're seeking a better life outside of here. And the irony that those people in the countries that they have exiled themselves to are still trying to come here, believing that the opportunity here in the United States is still the best. It's wild. It's wild to see this kind of Two of Pentacles like movement where people are running out. People born and raised here in this country are running out, and people born in other countries are influxing in because they think this is the better opportunity. Maybe it is. I don't know. But the US is kind of looking neck and neck to everyone else. People are leaving here and having fruitful lives in Central America, South America, and Africa, and Southeast Asia, and other parts of Eastern Europe. People are moving from here, from this country. People are moving to other countries, learning the language and having fruitful lives. And I still find it ironic that people still want to come here. But when you've lived at some place all your life, you can say that it's not all it's cracked up to be, right? Until you go someplace else and you experience what life is like there. And then you can make the comparison. Because people coming from other countries can say that about their home country, that it's not all that it's cracked up to be, and feel like here is where they can thrive and they can live. It's really interesting times. But to see all of these different parts, different movements happening, and not really be able, at least for me, there are other astrologers and seers and spiritualists who have and are making predictions about the empire, the American empire, the US empire, and the direction that this is going to go. But I'm not allowed to see what that can be. From my end, I have to follow the uncertainty, and that's scary because I want to prepare myself the best way that I can, and I want to prepare my community the best way that I can, but I'm only allowed to see so far. I'm only allowed to see so far, but I'm also drawn to keeping us focused on self-actualization, despite the external noise that's going on and the external factors that's happening. How to make this life accessible to us and allow us to thrive despite what's going on outside, That's what's been my focus, but also to provide perspective and commentary on the things that's happening so that people can feel informed, assured, and even incited in their own body to create conversations with their own communities about the things that's happening in this world. I never considered myself someone like a cultural commentator or whatever, but I feel like I'm being pushed into that space and have been for years, and I've avoided. So it could also be why, instead of just putting this in Instagram stories, that I just came on my podcast to just talk my thoughts out loud and to share some of the things that I'm feeling with my community. So this isn't going to be long. I really just wanted to share where I'm at with the politics, pontificate politics a little bit, but also encourage us to vote and hope that by the time you listen to this podcast, you did vote, and not just in the presidential election, in your local and your state elections as well. Cast a vote. Let your voice be heard. And yes, things would be better if we didn't have this two-party system, because for the life of me, even when I learned in social studies about our government, I kept asking myself, like, why do we need all of this shit? Why do we need all of this shit? This is a lot. It's a lot. Our government is so intricate. And unless you take like American studies, you only learn in grammar school. You only learn in grammar school just the basics of what the government is, the cabinets, the executive branch, the legislative branch. You only know just enough to kind of get you by. You don't know about all the departments and the cabinets that we have, the different secretaries that we have, what they do, how they function, all these different intricacies. You don't know about all of these things unless you go out and you research, right? So most people don't know about the intricacies and layers of our government, of the US government. It's so many layers, right? I have for years asked myself, did we need to create this complex gubernatorial system in order to survive? Like, people just used to exchange food and cows and make treaties. Like, this isn't to say that we don't need things like rules, right? The way Earth is structured, the way this country is structured, we need rules, right? Anytime there's humans involved, we need rules, we need guidelines, we need boundaries, right? But do we need it to be this intricate? And I understand that as time evolved, as humans evolved, as environments evolved, the rules and the guidelines and the policies and the boundaries and the things that keep us safe have to evolve. But when you think about it, have they? Has our government evolved to keep up with the evolution that's happening with humans in our time and our environment? I don't think so. I think there's still so many rules and guidelines and amendments and treaties and things that are from hundreds of years ago that don't actually apply to what is happening in real time. And we're still abiding by it. We're still binding ourselves to it. So all those things I think about often and wonder, why can't we just simplify how we live? Like, we have to pay for water and it comes from the earth. I'm afraid that they're going to try to start charging us for air because we don't own anything. Not for real. We rent everything. Like, everything is a rental system. I'll never forget one of the first times I upgraded my phone, and I was like, yeah, so I'm going to purchase the phone. And it was like, oh, if you want to purchase the phone, it's $3,000, but you can rent it. And I'm like, rent? When did we start doing that? When did we start renting? I have to rent my phone. Like, my phone is so out of reach for me to own. I have to rent to own, like lease. I'm leasing my phone like I lease a car. It's crazy. And I don't know who came up with leasing the phone, but fuck them, because that's all we do. That's all we do now is lease phones. That's it. We lease to own. We lease to own everything. Everything is borrowed. Everything is on a credit. Credit is made up. All of these things are made up to add more depth and intricacies that we don't need. So, yeah, we got to vote for this crazy government and this crazy capitalistic system that we live in, but it doesn't mean that it's not falling apart. It doesn't mean that change won't come. I just want us collectively to have an active voice in the change, to be able to speak about the change, and to be able to say that because I voted, because I exercised my right, that many people, particularly if you are Black, died for so that you could do. Right? There's a Black woman in Mississippi who voted free for the first time in her life. Black people had to pay to vote. And we get to vote for free, right? So all these progressions that have happened with particularly Black Americans in this country, I want us to be able to participate in that. And of course, it is your right. It's your choice. But I want us to be active participants in things that people fought very hard for us to have the privilege to do. So that's my ramble scramble. That's my pontificating on politics. And if you stayed this long, I thank you for tapping in. And yeah, make sure you go vote until we meet again. Thank you for tapping into the Muses Lab. I hope you enjoyed this week's adventure. Be sure to like this episode, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and share the wealth with others. Sign up for my newsletter and join the TML community at www.themuseslab.com. Receive weekly musings, early access, and exclusive drops, as well as discounts on products and services. Thank you once again for tapping in, and until next time.